warm welcome to Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point. I'm Wang Guan, sitting in for Liu Xin. In this series, I dissect stories that are making headlines around the world and talk to my guests to compensate for the missing pieces of the puzzle. So join us in real time by sending us your comments or questions via the CGTN webpage on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or Weibo. If you're watching this live on the CGTN app, email us at thepointwithalex@cgtn.com. Let us know what you think. We start our live streaming every Friday at 11 a.m. Beijing time, so get in touch and we just might read out your questions. Before we start, let's look at some social media comments we got on the topic we're talking about today, the 14th five-year plan. Now, YouTube user JVP said this: I think China in particular has come to realize the importance of self-sufficiency and diversification of sourcing critical supplies. The good thing is they are in the position to continually improve this drive due to a strong and just government as well as a sensible, hardworking, and intelligent population. I really look forward to seeing how China improves in the next 5 to 10 years. Well, thank you very much for your compliments. YouTube user WC said this: China has 5, 10, 20, 25, and 50-year plans that they succeed in reaching, while in the West they have 5-year-old plans that are never reached or get reversed by the end of their term by a different government in power. Well, now that you think about it, if not all changes, not all reversals are bad, if the Biden administration can rejoin the Paris Climate Accord, I mean, that would be a good thing, no? YouTube user Jennifer Sun said this: the advantage of China's system is that they do not have to answer to short-term demands, and they can move forward on long-term plans for next 5 years, 10 years, etc. And in general, those plans do become reality to some degree. On the other hand, because they are not adjusting quickly to changing conditions, because they generally do not need to, mistakes can be made for many years and resulting in issues bigger than normally possible. In the U.S., every politician has great plans, most of which never become reality, because they're totally unrealistic. Those politicians probably knew they were impossible. For example, cutting the tax for everyone and reduce the deficit at the same time while solving homelessness, build great infrastructure, but they sound good to the voters. Well, regarding the China comment, I mean, I appreciate your comment, but let's not forget there are feedback mechanisms in China as well. Think about all the closed door as well as open press consultations, meetings between the government, party officials, and think tanks, universities. Also, media here in China function differently than those in the West, for sure, but media in China assume a watchdog role nonetheless, especially the social media these days. Now, this week, we are looking at media coverage on China's proposals for the 14th five-year plan, which were revealed last month. Do the media make the key points clear, or are they spinning the facts into something to fear? First, what exactly is China's 5-year plan, and why should people care? Well, it is basically a blueprint that maps out China's growth starting in 1953. China has made 13 5-year plans so far. The first one, from 1953 to 1957, helped China transition from an agricultural society to an industrialized economy. Since the 6th 5-year plan, the package has aimed to transform a centrally planned economy into more of a market-driven economy. And since the 11th 5-year plan, China has placed more emphasis on deciding development directions instead of setting specific targets. Here's what's been achieved since the last 5-year plan. In terms of the economy and people's livelihoods, as you can see, by 2019, China met most of the targets. And by 2020, the rest of the goals are likely to be achieved as well. As we all know, the next 5 years will pose significant challenges, not just to China, but to every single nation and individual, as COVID-19 pandemic continues to spread and disrupt life as we know it. Economies around the world are also taking brutal hits, as lockdowns, social distancing measures, and restrictions stifle business and travel. And then there's the trend of trade protectionism, tariffs, which was already fanning the flames of uncertainty before the virus hit. But for China, where should the country focus its resources? What is the smartest way to grow? How should the country respond to factors both within the country and outside? To address these concerns, China's new proposed targets for the 14th 5-year plan has some ideas. According to the communique released after the 5th plenary session of the 19th CPC, China will strengthen its domestic market, further improve its economy, its economic structure, and fortify its innovation capacity. The proposal also stresses the importance of self-reliance on technology and green technology in particular, and what it is calling double development dynamic, the idea that internal as well as international circulation should complement each other. The next 5 years will be very busy. So why should the world care? Well, for one, given China has been able to largely get its COVID-19 outbreak under control, its economy has started to recover. China reported a 4.9% gross domestic product growth in its third quarter compared to a year ago. That is a huge improvement if you think about the first quarter, which saw a 6.8% decline, and compared to the second quarter, which had a 3.2% increase. Since China is the world's second largest economy, this is also good news for the world. In fact, the IMF last month predicted that China will be the only major economy in the world to show a positive growth rate in 2020. If China's economy can bounce back, it can most probably propel global economic growth and trade until other countries can get back on their feet. The proposals also present some more promising endeavors. Emphasis on innovation will promote new technologies and jobs. In fact, the word innovation was, I guess, mentioned 47 times in the proposal. In green technology, it is hoped that it will make a positive impact on climate change and the environment. And the commitment to keep opening up its markets will provide an attractive business climate for foreign investors and entrepreneurs. That is a lot of good news, and yet some media reports refuse to see it that way. Instead, they choose to interpret China's proposals as a threat or draw imaginary conclusions to feed their fears. Let's take a look at some of them. Some actually opinion pieces presented by some global media outlets. First, a Reuters financial commentary piece from November the 2nd reads, China's latest 5-year plan girds for battle. The opening paragraph said this, China's latest 5-year plan suggests President Xi Jinping is girding for battle. Despite the recent economic rebound from the pandemic, the tone from the ruling CPC's closed-door meetings was notably less cheerful than in 2015. Although details are scarce for now, Beijing is intensifying preparations for geopolitical and corporate arms races. Fear-mongering over facts. We've seen it before, and we'll probably see it again. And here it comes. It's a bit odd to see the technique used to talk about China's economic plan. The headline accuses Beijing of preparing for battle, but then the bulk of the article focuses on how China is elevating the importance of technological self-reliance and pursuing quality over quantity when it comes to GDP growth. It is not really the same thing. It's also important to note that these priorities have emerged because of the reality on the ground. For example, the U.S. have export controls to China's chip-making SMIC Corporation, which would handicap China's semiconductor industry. So Beijing is making tech self-reliance a priority because it has to, not because it is preparing for some kind of quote-unquote corporate arms race. If the U.S. doesn't want to sell its products to China, then China will probably have to do it itself. The piece also hones in one more paragraph from, as it mentions, the 6,200-word message, which says, China will comprehensively strengthen military training and preparation for war. But in the same paragraph, it admits this year's defense budget of China only increased 6.6%, the lowest rate in decades. It is a mixed message here. Even if that amount rises in the next few years, many people would argue that every country has a right to defend itself. It's also worth noting that China still spends a significantly smaller percentage of its GDP, only 1.9% on defense in 2019. The rate is much smaller than that of the US, India, Russia, and Turkey, according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. I mean, no wonder the article says the details to support its saber-rattling headlines are scarce. They are practically non-existent. Our next example is from Nikkei Asian Review. The November 4th opinion piece headline reads, China's 2035 plan raises fears of a greater confrontation with the U.S. The piece covers the same ideas. that China's new 5-year plan is a direct threat to the U.S. It says the plan makes clear China's strategy to seize technological hegemony from the U.S. The friction between them that will likely grow as a result is worrisome. Is that really clear? China's plans to improve its own technological industry do not imply it is necessarily going to seize anything from the U.S. or overpower the U.S. in terms of technological hegemony. But relax, folks. Worst case, it'll probably inject a little competition into the market, which will spur innovation and creativity in important industries, like the green technology industry. The U.S. should be confident enough in its own innovation capabilities not to fret about China's growth. But the article does not stop there. It warns that if China catches up with the U.S. on the economic front, it can look to surpass the U.S. in military capability. Well, that is quite a leap. The first does not necessarily imply the second. It is a logical fallacy, but it is also harmful. People who do not know any better might interpret this kind of argument as rooted in fact, not speculation. Our last example comes from a Bloomberg opinion piece from October 14th that reads, China is loading up a 5-year warning shot to the U.S. Whatever Beijing targets, competitors outside China will feel the pang. This time, it's 5G and green tech. Once again, those same culprits, 5G and green tech, are depicted here as ready to ruin everything for the rest of the world. And yet again, it is misleading. The article says investors are betting on industrial companies, but China's 14th 5-year plan could bring a lot more stress to a post-COVID-19 economy attempting a recovery. The world should watch carefully as Beijing gets ready to unveil a blueprint focused on high-tech industry, unquote. The overall argument is that China's plan should worry the world because if China grows in certain areas, namely tech and green tech, there will be no more opportunities for the rest of the world. They will all be gone, but that's just not the case. This is zero-sum thinking. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin made it clear too, and I quote, he said, we never seek hegemony or expansion. That's why China has so many friends all over the world. The label of infiltration and threat can never be pinned on China. Actually, China has said time and time again that it has no intention to pursue economic hegemony. It's different developmental focus at different stages, be it GDP growth, manufacturing, or innovation now, has nothing to do with China's geopolitical calculations and a lot to do with ensuring a stable China. And as the world wades deeper and deeper through the chaos of COVID-19 pandemic, a stable China is most probably good for everyone, economically and geopolitically. As the article says, the world should watch carefully as the world's second largest economy unveils its blueprint for growth. What China does matter to the world, but do not watch in fear. Watch because there are opportunities to seize, momentum to harness, and growth to celebrate, for example. With that, we will take a break, and when we come back, we will talk to our guests about what China's new 5-year plan is really about. And is it as threatening as some media are making it sound? Back, guys, for our discussion on China's 14th 5-year plan. More, we're joined by Huang Ping, Executive President from China Institute of Hong Kong, Professor BAOCHENG from University of International Business and Economics, and last but not least, Professor DAYA THUSSU, Professor of International Communication from Hong Kong Baptist University. Welcome, gentlemen, to all of you. Professor Liu, good to see you again. Welcome back to The Point, my friend. I mean, what's your interpretation, what's your reading of China's 14th 5-year plan so far? I mean, to start with, there are a lot of misconceptions in the West saying that, you know, this is a relic of the communist era, the Soviet era planned economy. But China certainly adapted the plans, the 5-year plan mechanism, to its national conditions, right?
Right. Yes, under a globalized world, there are fewer countries that handle a 5-year plan from the central government. But that's why China is being accused or misunderstood as, you know, still copying the Russian planning economy, which has failed. But as a matter of fact, if we see that the Renaissance was really holding the name of rejuvenating the Greek type of management and philosophy, governance, etc. But the Renaissance took a very different path, very different version. So the same story goes to China's 5-year plan. So it is no longer mandatory, as we do see that over the past 4 decades, the market economy has really boomed, which served not only the Chinese people's welfare, but contribute a great deal to the world economy. So now the plan itself, in appearance, it is still something that is really authoritative, but it is there to point a direction and unfold a blueprint. So on the implementation level, it is really respect the global needs and support the global supply chain and strengthen the role of China's contributing factors. So the fact that China is now also accused of more inward looking, it is no longer an economy that can, for itself, can afford autarky, but rather to continue to work with the rest of the world. So yes, there is a certain element that China is being more conservative or self-defensive, but there's a good reason to it. If I'm constantly threatened that the restaurant will not serve me, I have to buy my own cooking utensils and learn the how to cook my own recipes to survive. So the response to that is that China goes for innovation, more self-reliance on some of the cutting-edge technologies, is really a response to the constant coercion that is produced, particularly headed by the United States.
China says it wants to pursue a path of dual circulation given the uncertainties of trade and geopolitical frictions. But with, most probably, or probably a new administration in the U.S. arising on the horizon, do you expect the trade tensions between China and the U.S. to ease somewhat? And do you expect that to happen fast?
Well, if Joe Biden does sit in the White House, we do see there is a kind of relaxation of the tension in terms of the trade, because he's known to have the tendency to embrace more of a liberal internationalism. And also that he proposes to rejoin the TPP and reactivate the membership within the climate change treaty, etc. And also that the new administration will realize that it is really the U.S. economy, it is really the U.S. consumers and even workers that are being hurt with all the trade war going on by eradicating high tariff barriers against made in China. So I think anyone with the right sense will realize that, and also the fact has proven that over the past 4 years. But having said that, the type of unwelcoming attitude towards China from the both sides of the aisles are still there, and there are also hawkish groups who hijack the U.S. politics. So therefore, we do not really see a substantial improvement, but in terms of technicality, in terms of communication and in negotiation style, there can be subtle changes, and we'll have to be prepared. And also, I think part of the notion of the new 5-year plan is factoring in the response to possible challenges from the United States as a contingency consideration.
Well, Professor Huang, in this proposal to China's 14th 5-year plan, China says very clearly that it wants to open itself up further to the rest of the world. More sectors will be open, more market access. At least that's the promise. Where is, the future of globalization and open trade and free trade if there were to be a new administration in the U.S.? Do you think the deglobalization trend will somewhat ease and China will emerge a leader working on multilateralism?
Well, I do think there are problems, difficulties, new challenges, and uncertainties since and because of partly the globalization. But the results or solutions and possible sort of ways out is rather not on the so-called decoupling, or either sort of new isolation, either to China, against China, or someone else, but rather to seriously to see how those challenges are actually common to all of us, and how by sort of new collaboration and cooperations and people's economies, as well as different countries.
First of all, hold on right there. I think we have a comment from our users, from our social media viewers. Okay, this friend, TP0025 on YouTube, I guess, said U.S. has no confidence in coming out ahead if China and the U.S. seek to develop their own economies peacefully. That is interesting. Professor THUSSU, where is the future of U.S.-China economic engagement or perhaps disengagement, you know, looking ahead, especially if there is a Biden administration?
As my fellow panelists said, there would be difference of tone and tenor maybe, but fundamentally, I don't think there will be a huge difference, because it's a question of China trying to challenge the privileged situation that the U.S. has enjoyed for at least 50 years, especially in high-tech sector. So if you think about 5G, for instance, there are more 5G relay stations in China than the rest of the world combined. If you look at the patents for, you know, 5G related technology in the World Intellectual, you know, organization, property organization, and you'll see China is far in everybody else. Only recently they launched a 6G satellite. So, you know, if you're sitting in Washington or Brussels, you're worried. Because it's not just about telephones, it's about IoT, it's about Internet of Things, it is industrial IoT. So it is, you know, it's a different league. And it's also, there will be these tensions, and that's perfectly understandable. But the relationship between these two countries, the two most important economies, is so multi-layered, is so deeply entrenched. It's been there for at least 40 years. It can't be an easy divorce, even if they talk about decoupling.
Also, on the 30th anniversary of the founding of Pudong area, President Xi Jinping addressed the ceremony and said that he supports Pudong's development, and actually he wanted Pudong to have high-quality reform and opening up. Professor Liu, what's your interpretation of President Xi's remarks?
Yes. He's trying to reiterate the Chinese strong stance towards the world, that China remains open and continue its reform. And Pudong is a perfect showcase of Chinese experience in building a modern financial city and a shipping hub. And also that Pudong is representative of all other areas, particularly the free trade zones, etc., to open this full arm for global investment and global cooperation, and also for Chinese companies to get further engaged with the rest of the world in terms of trade and investment.
President Huang, I mean, what do you think when it comes to President Xi's remarks, whereby he also said he hopes Pudong will be a leader in building socialist modernization for China? I mean, how do you see that happening?
My understanding, first, Pudong after Shenzhen has been the case that China can achieve through the opening and the reform. And this time, President Xi emphasizes the importance of more open and deeper reform. I think since the so-called trade war against China launched from the USA, China has adopted a very correct strategy to respond to this. Instead of closing China's economy, but rather China prefers to be more open towards outside and to have more sort of deeper economic reform. And Pudong has been the case and will be the case. And in terms of the new term, the leader for a socialist modern China, I think the leader here, I mean, my understanding, he means the leader in Chinese cities, amongst the Chinese areas, Pudong has been and will continue to be the case. Second, since this year, by the end of this year, in a month, or by the June next year, China will officially declare we have achieved the well-being society. So from the next 5-year program, China is getting into this new stage, new era for a modern state, modern country, modern economy. So Pudong will still play such a significant role in this new era. That's my understanding.
I want to thank all of you, Huang Ping from China Institute of Hong Kong, Professor Liu Baocheng from University of International Business and Economics, and Professor DAYA THUSSU from the Hong Kong Baptist University. Thank you all so much for taking time off to join us today. Thank you. And that will do it for this edition of Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point. On behalf of myself and the whole team, thank you again for joining us. I hope to see you next time. Thank you.